everyone. Thanks for joining us on Arise Special. On Arise News, I am Ngozi Alebu. My guest today is someone that you would truly love to listen to and meet. He's in the person of the Right Honorable Umar Ghali Abba, the Speaker from 1999 to 2003, a man in whose tenure the House of Reps did not look exactly like what many people have come to get used to. It's been described as the most vibrant reps in the history of Nigeria. But let me not waste too much time. Let me bring him in now and introduce my guest. It's a pleasure to have you, Right Honorable Umar Ghali Abba, on the show today.
Thank you very much, Ngozi.
Yes, now we will get to your politics and all of that, but let's start from the beginning, where you were born into a business-oriented family, and I do understand that you actually handled the family business for quite a while. Help us understand that background a little bit before we get into other issues.
Well, my father was a businessman, and he inherited business from his father too. And after while doing my youth service, it became imperative that I had to get into the business and spend some time, so that I supported him, because I'm the eldest son he had, and that was what happened. But throughout, my flair had been with politics, because I grew up in an environment where there was so much oppression. Where I come from, or where I was born, in Kano City and in Kano Municipal, is an area where the NEPU, Northern Elements Progressive Union, that political party, I'm sure you're aware of.
Yes.
That was a stronghold of NEPU, because Malam Aminu Kano too, the leader of NEPU, came from that area. And our parents belonged to the NEPU. They were supporting the NEPU. And because the aristocracy was supporting the NPC, and they were opposed to NEPU, my area was like deprived of so many social institutions, including even schools. Because it was a Herculean task to get the local education authority to establish a school, a primary school in my area. Luckily for us, at that time, Alhaji Yahya Kwande, the former Nigeria's ambassador in Switzerland, at one time Secretary of the Government of the Plateau State, was the district officer in Kano, and I was very close to my father. And my father spoke to him on the need for a school in our area, and that was how a primary school got built. So there was so much oppression on us by the MPC, and therefore I grew up asking questions. And that was what baptized me into politics.
What were some of those questions? What exactly was going through your mind at the time? And exactly how did you even plan to execute some of those ideas that you had on your mind? Of course, that is bringing us straight into how you got into politics.
Well, since my childhood, I have been averse to oppression. I don't like to see people being oppressed, and I don't like to see opinions being oppressed. And growing up, when we came out of our homes to go to our Islamic school, in the evenings, we'll suddenly see the whole area cordoned off, and policemen, roaming around, arresting people. In fact, even our parents used to be arrested.
For what?
For belonging to the NEPU. And that was...
They saw NEPU as a threat
Yes, of course.
I know that Aminu Kano's NEPU sort of like was pro-poor, pro-talakawas.
Yes,
Did
but
the elite feel that this group of people were a threat to whatever they stood for?
well, you see, NEPU in Kano, because Kano was the stronghold of NEPU.
Mm.
NEPU was supported by the business class
Oh,
in Kano,
okay.
even though some members of the business class were also supporting the MPC, the aristocracy.
Mm.
But NEPU was used to be bankrolled by the business class. Even Mala Aminu Kano, who was the leader of the NEPU, used to be financed by our parents.
Okay.
Because he had to lead the party. He could not do anything for a living because he had to feed his home, he had to pay his bills. So all of these functions were distributed among our parents.
Okay.
For example, my father used to sew the dresses that Mala Aminu Kano used to wear.
Really?
Yes. Another person would pay the electricity bills. Another person would pay the water bills. Another person would buy the rice. Another person would buy the maize with which his home was being fed. You see?
So in other words, the people actually owned not just the political ideologies of that time, they actually financed or funded, if you like, the politicians. And so it wasn't necessary for any politician at the time to want to dip their hands into the public till.
Yes.
So the tendency to be corrupt was very highly minimized.
Yes, certainly. There was so much disincentive for doing that. And it was in Malam Aminu Kano's house because he had a library in his house, and it's in one corridor in the house. When you are going into the house, you will see all his books there. And I used to read some of the books. That was where my political inclinations started. I used to read books written by Mao Zedong.
Oh.
You see, Lenin, and many writers, both in English and Hausa.
But those were considered extremists in their views, socialism, communism, and all of that. You buy into those ideologies. And did those ideologies guide your politics?
Of course, I enriched myself with such ideas also. Because, you see, knowledge is such that my conception of knowledge is that once you read anything, you retain what is essential and useful and discard what is useless. That is my own conception of knowledge, and I was enriched by many of those literature that I read since then. And that opened my mind to curiosity as to the nature of things, as to philosophy.
Yes.
And that was how I grew up. And when I won election and come to the House of Representatives and eventually became the Speaker, I thought that like a writer put it, that policy emerges when concept encounters opportunity. My conception of how a polity should be run, emerged, was given a platform, was given an opportunity. So I considered the office as an opportunity for me to express myself politically.
And it seems you were destined to actually become Speaker when you consider the circumstances that brought you, to becoming the speaker. I recall the man who was there before you, based on certain issues that happened at the time, had to step down. And before that, you had actually stepped down for him. You had considered the position to him, and there you were, taking over from him as speaker. So you could say that destiny beckoned and brought you there. We're going to talk about your political philosophy and that tenure, that 4-year tenure of yours as Speaker of the House of Reps. Very, very, one that Nigerians would not forget in a hurry. We will explore all of those when we come back from this short break. All right, you're welcome back. You're watching Arise Special on Arise News. I am Ngozi Alebu. My guest is the Right Honorable Ghali Umar Abba, the former Speaker of the Nigerian House of Representatives between 1999 and 2003. And before we went on that break, he was telling us about the beginnings. And now we're going to find out what his politics is, what has been the guiding principle, what is his political philosophy. Thank you so much for staying with us. Now let's come to how you now came into politics. 1999, apparently from what you said earlier, you had always been involved in politics at some level, and then now at the federal level in 1999, 21 years now.
Yes. That
Nigeria started this democratic journey that some have described as an experiment, nascent, and all of that. First, let me even ask you, what are your thoughts on Nigeria's democracy so far since 1999? Has it lived up to its promise?
I don't think so. A lot of us are very sad about what democracy has become today. It is a sad commentary, on this polity that most actors are running around democracy instead of nurturing it.
Okay.
And when you look at what democracy is supposed to bring and what we have today, you know that we don't have a democracy.
What would you call what we have now?
I call it pseudo-democracy. If at all, it should be called a democracy. Because, you see, any democracy that takes away politics from the people is not democracy. And that is what the political actors had done in this country quietly, without the knowledge of the people themselves. You see, it is, today, the votes of the people don't count, particularly within the political parties. And what I'm trying to say is that internal democracy has been obliterated.
Okay.
And internal democracy is even more important than, the general election that takes place every 4 years. And the absence of internal democracy, you see, internal democracy is very pervasive. Its absence is therefore also pervasive.
What do you think is responsible for that, this lack of internal democracy within the political parties themselves, which you say is very foundational?
Greed. Greed of some political actors, particularly our governors from 1999, and they passed it on and on and on. A political philosopher once wrote that life is a perpetual contention for honor, riches, and authority, which ceases only in death. And I thought that every politician must be able to know this phrase.
Okay.
Because what
maybe you should repeat that phrase again.
You see, this phrase,
Yeah.
what it simply means is that as politicians, we must exercise restraint.
Mm.
Because accumulation of power, riches, and authority, which sees only in the accumulation of those variables, is very, very dangerous, because it causes people to go into so many waters that are detrimental to the people.
So I wonder what you'd have to say then about the kind of revelations and, well, let's say allegations of what has been happening within the polity, both with the anti-corruption agency, which is supposed to fight corruption to a standstill. You know, this government came to power on the plank of zero tolerance for corruption. And here we are, all kinds of cans of worms being opened. Allegations that are mind-boggling to the average Nigerian. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, you see, my thought on anti-corruption is that anti-corruption is supposed to be fought, you know, philosophically. There must be a philosophical framework. Mm. So far, there hasn't been any. You know, corruption has been fought on the basis of just criminality. You know,
okay.
The government doesn't look at the social side of it. Why are people getting into corrupt actions? The government must ask itself why. Because the issue of corruption is like the issue of the old prostitute, who says that everybody wants a prostitute, but nobody wants to talk about a prostitute. Apology to everybody.
Apology taken.
You see, there must be a framework with which corruption is tackled. First of all, government must tackle the issue of insecurity.
Mm.
Because everybody in life wants to be secure. Secure, everybody wants to live, in security.
Mm.
Everybody wants to live happily. And what is the minimum that people need?
Yes.
Shelter, food. How many Nigerians are sheltered today? How many Nigerians can eat 3 square meals in a day? And how many Nigerians, for example, are being owed by governments? People will go put their money, execute government contracts, and 3, 4, 5 years they'll not be paid. They'll be in penury. And then where service is concerned, you find out that people are not being given what they need,
The reward system.
The reward system. And then a situation arose where bureaucrats are no longer feeling secure in their job.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these things are things that are supposed to be addressed. We have in this country a situation where you have to have your own water system. Most people have boreholes in their homes.
Yes, indeed.
You have to have your own private doctor, because you can't go to a public hospital and get the right kind of attention, no drugs, and no attention. Then you can't also get good education for your children unless you take them to private schools, right? So when you aggregate, you find out that the government almost doesn't do anything for the people.
So the people are on their own to fend for themselves.
People resort to self-help. And that is why corruption has become pervasive. The incentive to become corrupt is always there. There was a time when you know, the, the basest thing you would do, a civil servant, is to give him money.
Yes.
Because he will feel disrespected. I witnessed this myself.
We had such a civil service in Nigeria.
I witnessed this myself. When I was growing up, my father was a businessman. Even though he was not a contractor, time to time from Kaduna, some of the permanent secretaries would call him and say, Alhaji, you are our businessman, please come, we have some jobs. Come and collect some for you and your friends. My father was in the import-export business. He was not a contractor, but he will go to Kaduna, you know, collect the LPOs, execute the jobs, and you know, and that was what used to happen. And in no time, he will be paid. One day I was traveling to Maiduguri in 1972, and my father gave me a lot of, about 10 sets of clothing to take to one of the permanent secretaries in the northern region.
Yes.
He was then the Commissioner of Home Affairs in the northeastern state. His name is Alhaji Muhammad Gujuba. He said, please, when you go to Maiduguri, ask my friend. My father had one friend there to take you to Alhaji Muhammad Gujuba. Please give him these dresses. Then he said to me, do you know why? Am I asking you to take these things for him? I said no. He said to me, when he was permanent secretary in the Northern Regional Ministry of Agriculture, he used to call me from time to time and give me jobs without me soliciting for them.
And without expecting any
without
reward.
expecting any reward. He will not take anything from my father. This used to happen, you know, in a pervasive manner. But today...
Seems like a different world.
Today, bureaucrats in the ministry will sit down and share jobs among themselves. They will share contracts among themselves. They don't give out to the public. And that is a potential source of instability. Because the essence of giving out contracts is not just in the projects, but in the funds that go into the hands of the people. You know, stability is realized in the system.
So you would agree with those who say that if any government is to succeed, including this one, that the very foundation of that success would have to be reforming the civil service. That if you don't fix the civil service, no amount of good intentions can actually work when it comes to fighting corruption and other ills that fight society.
That is part of it.
Okay.
But another thing is, why don't we say fight those things that bring about corruption instead of fight against corruption? Fight against those things that bring about corruption.
The system that allows for corruption to thrive.
Fight against those things that bring about corruption. This would have given you a philosophical framework within which to plan your infrastructure, to plan to obtain everything under the sun, you know, that the people need, basically, like shelter, you know, how people will manage to get 3 square meals a day, and all of these things can come under this. But once that philosophical framework is not there, I don't see how corruption, maybe they are underrating corruption. Maybe they are thinking that people are corrupt because they just decided to be corrupt. You know, there was a controversy a few years ago on whether stealing is corruption or it's not corruption. You know, even though stealing is a subset of corruption.
Yes.
You understand me? But you see, nobody wants to tarnish his honor.
Yeah, absolutely.
And corruption is something that tarnishes people's honor.
Yes. And there was a
Therefore,
time
that will tell you that not everybody
really
wants
wants
to get involved in corrupt actions.
Mm.
A lot of people are being forced to, because the system does not protect anybody.
Mm.
So the system must be made to protect people. Once that is done, you will see that people will protect their honor and integrity.
Let's come to the legislature, which you were headed as Speaker of the House of Reps, but we will talk about that when we come back from this short break. Very important point that you raised about corruption there and how to tackle it from the root. Stay with us. We'll go on a break now. Right, welcome back. You're watching Arise Special on Arise News. I am Ngozi Alibu, and my guest is Right Honorable Ghali Umar Naaba, former Speaker of Nigerian House of Representatives. Thank you so much for staying with us. You've been talking about, very, very fundamental issues there, talking about corruption and how to get to the root of it. Well, let's talk about your tenure as Speaker of the House. A lot of people looking back, those who are old enough to understand the goings-on at the time, and compare that with other legislatures, whether the ones before yours or the ones after, continue to say that particular legislature that you headed actually did stand out. As a matter of fact, it goes down in history as the number one, the only. Let me put it succinctly. Naaba's house remains the only house that has been able to overturn a president's veto on a bill. What exactly was it? I was going to ask you earlier your guiding philosophy in your politics, and that you seem to have brought that to bear as Speaker of the House of Reps. Are you a rebel with a cause?
Well, I'm not a rebel. I just thought that everybody needs some respect. We are all human beings, and we must treat each other or one another as human beings. And that was my first principle while running the House of Representatives. Every member, wherever he came from, whatever his persuasion, I regarded him as a human being. And I would give him his dues, unless he decided he didn't want the dues. And I thought that Nigerians must regard themselves. God created us, different people, different nations, different tribes, so that we may know one another.
Yes.
And the objective of knowing one another is for us to be able to live in harmony. If, I am Hausa, if you are Hausa and he's Hausa, in Nigeria, you are from the southeast, I suppose.
Yes.
He's from the southeast.
Of Igbo extraction.
Yes. And all of us in Nigeria are Hausas. And then all of us in Africa are Hausas. And then all over the world, everybody is a Hausa man or an Igbo man. Is there any need for us to know one another? Because as Hausas, we must have had the same language, the same culture, the same everything. So there is no need for exchange. So there's this saying that people must be brought together, so that they work towards the same objective of, living in harmony. And that is, I believe, a challenge on all of us, that whatever persuasion we come from, we must be able to blend and work together. And that was what I did in the House of Representatives. It's painstaking. It took me a long time, almost a year, to blend the House with the support of the members, of course. And that was why the House was regarded as a cult. And in particular, this presidential veto.
Yes.
You know, what happened was, after the executive arm sent the bill on NDDC, we decided to send our committees to the south, where the oil is being produced. The Committee on Petroleum Resources, the Committee on Environment. They went there, spent almost 2 weeks traversing between rivers, Bielsa and Delta. And they came to us with all the data and the problems of the area. And we thought we must increase the contribution of the federal government and the contribution of the oil companies by certain percentages. And then we sat down and we negotiated, you know, because the Northwest members also needed particular things in the Northwest. That is a commission called Arid Areas Development Commission. And the North Central members also wanted this commission hyperdeck, because certain states, Kogi, Kwara, Kebbi, Niger, the Niger River during the rainy season is in the habit of devastating
the areas,
part of the areas, and they wanted a commission to be established that will contain that and also canalize certain areas for irrigation and things like that. And also, so we all sat down, we negotiated. Look, brothers in the south, we must assist them with this commission, and we must increase these contributions from the federal government and the oil companies, because our committees recommended so. So we had caucuses in the House then. The South had its caucus with its leader. The Northwest had its own with its leader. I was not the leader of the caucus. Someone else was. The Northeast also had its own caucus. The North Central too. So we allowed each caucus to go and discuss with its members and came with a stand. And the stand was that we must support the increase in the contribution of the oil companies to the federal government. All the caucuses accepted, and then it was accepted that the North Central caucus should be supported with the hyperdeck bill, and the Northwest caucus should be supported with the Arid Area Development Commission bill. That was harmonious.
But in other words, every region, every part of the country was actually looking for one interventionist.
Let me.
Yes, go ahead, please.
And once I got that mandate, I now asked that every member who was on assignment anywhere in the world should come back, because I set a specific date when we would sit down and override the veto. And I cancelled all travels to any other place until that was accomplished. And I spoke to all the members on the need to carry out that assignment. And I thank God that day 306 members out of 359 sat down and override the veto. After that happened, I now went to the Senate President, which was Senator Chuba Okadibo, and I told him what we had done, and I challenged him to also ensure that the Senate also, do the same.
Yes.
And of course, they did the same, and that was how it happened. And it was a challenge on me, but I am happy I did it, and I am happy that the other caucuses did not go back on their pledge, because eventually the Arid Areas Development Commission bill was passed, but Obasanjo refused to establish it. Hyperdev also was passed. Obasanjo refused to assent to the bill. It was President Umar Ghali who assented to the Hyperdev bill.
Wow.
Later on.
And that achievement seems to have, as welcomed as land, mark an achievement as it was. It didn't go down well with some people, including the presidency at the time. And they made sure that you did not come back in 2003. Looking back, I mean, what are your thoughts about that? Because that seems to have sort of, to some extent, truncated your political career. Looking back, do you forgive those who stood in your way of, getting back into the, being re-elected into the House of Reps?
Well, historically, every person who stands up against tyranny and oppression suffers. And I am no exception. In doing that, I knew exactly what I was doing. And in any case, you see, the position of speaker is not something that, it's a very perilous position. If you look into history, you'll see that the origin, how did the concept of speakership started? It started in Britain with the commoners. The commoners didn't have representation in the parliament. The parliament was populated by aristocrats. The commoners will be peeping through the windows and agitating for their demands. And one day, the king, he was there in the House of Lords, and the commoners kept agitating, and in his rage, he said, "Oh, you commoners, why don't you elect somebody among you to speak for you?" That was how the speakership started. And they had nowhere to sit, so that was how they started getting organized. And they started having meetings in areas of London because they didn't have anywhere to sit. For example, in Abuja,
yes,
if they sit today in Maitama, somewhere, they will say, okay, next sitting in Muse 2. They will get somewhere and meet. Then they will say, okay, next meeting at Garki 1. That was how they were doing. Then one day they decided to ask for a place for themselves to be meeting. That was how
the House of Commons.
And then the speaker, because he speaks for the people, I think almost about 3 or 4 speakers were killed by the king.
Wow.
At different times. Because when he goes with the demands of the people and the king is not happy, he will be beaten up, and on such occasions, I think about 3 or 4 speakers were killed. So it's not, it's a very perilous position. If you do your job, you will always be harassed. And when we passed that, when we overrode that, veto,
particular veto,
the Obasanjo's kitchen cabinet frightened him. They said to him, look, if this guy would mobilize this number of people to override your veto, he can also mobilize them to remove you. So since then, the harassment continued. And that ended in what happened in 2003 over my election. Because they did all they could to have me impeached. They couldn't. And when the election was going to take place, they sent, I think, almost all the mobile policemen in the north were sent to come to ensure that I did not return to the house.
And they succeeded in doing that.
Thank God that everything happened. And my political career has not been truncated. It's only stalled you know, for me to be able to strategize and come back. I'm going to come back as something.
All right, we're going to explore that comeback in your political trajectory when we return from this short break. Do stay with us. All right, thanks for staying with us on Arise Special. I'm still speaking with the Right Honorable Ghali Umar Nabba, the Speaker of Nigeria's House of Reps in the Fourth Republic between 1999 and 2003. He's been speaking about a lot of things, but let's talk about more on these issues. The quality of legislation so far and the legislative process that you have been observing since you haven't been there. What would you say about that very briefly so that we can dwell on some of the other things? So much has been happening in terms of the seeming lack of separation of powers and checks and balances in this present administration. What are your thoughts?
Well, it is true what you said, and these are all functions of the truncation of internal democracy. Because if there were internal democracy in our system, you know, a lot of things that you see happening wouldn't have happened. You will see that the legislature, both the House and the Senate, most times when you look on television, you see that only a small fraction of members attend sittings. And that is also reflected on the work they do. You know, one of the reasons is that a lot of them are not interested. They are there not because they are interested in coming to the legislature, but because the governor will sit down and say, look, you will go to House of Representatives, you will go to Senate, you will go there, you will go there. And he will do all of these things based on his own desires, not because these people are interested and they will work towards adding value to democracy. So this is what is happening. So a lot of things happen because they don't have an idea what is the legislature, what is it supposed to do, and there is very little political education in this country. I discussed this matter with some of our presidents, that this National Orientation Agency must be conducting tutorials for party executives from the ward, the local government and states, and not just the ruling party, all the parties, because all the parties have the potential to form governments at any level. So people must know why we are operating a democracy. Where is it taking us to? Where is it supposed to take us to?
Are these part of the things you teach? Because I do understand that you actually teach at the Institute of Legislative Affairs.
I do.
Okay.
I do. I was teaching them political parties and parliamentary politics. And then later on, they asked me to teach them parliamentary administration. And I'm doing this because I had gained and garnered tremendous experiences in the House, while running the House. And I thought I must impart these experiences to other people. And that was why, and even the institute, I was instrumental to setting it up. Yes, you know. So a lot of things need to be done in order to add value to our democracy. And that is the reason. You see, when I was the speaker, what I tried to do was to insist on this separation of powers. Not because the three arms must not, collaborate and work for Nigerians, but because, in that inevitable friction,
yes,
as a result of the distribution of governmental powers, the people, enjoy freedom. If there is collusion, it will be a different story. And that is what is almost happening in the last few years.
Which is really unfortunate. Now, let's talk about, because you did mention the issue of the NDDC. I mean, I'm surprised that as far back as 1999 and 2003, the issue of the Niger Delta Development Commission was on the front burner. It was priority for you. And incidentally, here we are. The NDDC is still a major source of contention within the polity. What are your thoughts about what you've been hearing? I'm sure you've been listening, and hearing all kinds of things coming out in terms of the sleaze and corruption within the NDDC.
Well, it is very, very sad what is going on. You see, this is a commission that was established, for the purpose of mitigating the unfortunate occurrences in the area arising from the exploration of oil. And today, what is happening is a side commentary on the NDDC. I've not been in government in a very long time, but I think every government from 2003 to date,
yes,
is responsible for one thing or another. That is either done or not done to check what is going on in NDDC. And then you have people from that area who are also not being fair, to the NDDC.
In what way?
Well, in the stealing,
okay.
That area, when you go and see how people are suffering, people in a lot of areas, people have no access to drinking water because the place they live is polluted. They cannot
and their
farm,
livelihoods are
totally
fish,
It's very, very pathetic. And for someone to come and sit down in the office and steal billions and deprive them of these things continually, I think it's not fair.
Is that why you have decided to come up with this movement, the National Consultative Forum, to fix some of these ills that you recognize within the system? And the question would be, I mean, other parties, both the ruling party and the one before it, came up with all kinds of promises and what have you. What are the guarantees that the NCF is going to be different from all of this? And let me throw in again, without the basic foundations that need to be in place, like the electoral reforms, what is the structure of governance? A lot of people have been talking about restructuring. Really, how much traction can you gain, even if you get the opportunity to be at the center of governance in the country without those basic fundamentals being taken care of? I'd like you to address those.
Well, we have a different administration today than what we had before 2015. And these structures were not there when this new administration came up. So because these structures are not there, does not mean that a new administration different from this one cannot come up. It all depends on the people. And we cannot sit down and say that, look, social structures are not there, so our effort is doomed or will not bring any dividend.
Okay. So what do you hope to achieve with the NCF?
Well, we hope to be able to mobilize people around certain ideals and aim to contest for elections under one party or whichever party we feel will satisfy our aspirations and come to power. If and when we are in power, we'll do everything we can to ensure that the electoral law is modified to suit our needs, and sanctions will be put in place for certain things, and many other things, and even restructure. Restructuring. Most of us are not averse to it, because I believe that after almost 60 years from independence, if certain people say, please, we're not enjoying this arrangement, why don't we have another look at it and see how we can make it fairer and better for all of us?
What
Because
kind of arrangement would you, recommend individually or even as a party?
Well, it will be presumptuous for me
okay.
to say this is the arrangement that must be done, but I have my own ideas, and starting from do not do unto others what you will not do unto yourself. Anything that I feel will benefit me, I will try to see that others also get it. And I have issues with the over-concentration of power at the center, too. And I want these issues resolved. For example, I want the federal government to return back Kano River project to Kano State.
Okay.
And dissolve the Hadera Jama'ari basin. And if other states, and I'm sure other states will benefit if the water basins, the basins around their areas are dissolved, so that the state governments take over these projects, because I have seen the damages done. What was done between 1968 and 1975 with the Kano River project, in 40 years, the federal government could not do it. And that is because of the structure.
Yes.
So things like that we'll look at and see, okay, just like we did during NDDC bill, because that is what I thought politics should be about. Negotiate. Look, we want this. Help us get this. And we now ask you, okay, we want this in return. Then you negotiate. This is the way we should go.
Now,
instead of regarding one another or each other as enemies.
Yes.
You know, we should be in the business of understanding one another with empathy and compassion, and live together like brothers and sisters, instead of eliciting the opprobrium of different sections of the country against different sections of the country.
Now let's talk about money politics. That seems to exclude people who have genuine interest and capacity to govern at any level in the country. What are your thoughts? How do you think this issue of money politics should be tackled?
You see, like I said earlier, most things must be tackled philosophically. Once you restore internal democracy within our political parties, you will see a lot of changes in the way politics is being practiced in this country. Even money politics will be substantially eliminated. Because I knew the period when money did not work in this country. Once people are interested in a particular candidate, they work for him, they contribute money, and ensure that he goes and presents them.
Yes.
People used to go and invite people they know are capable and ask them to contest for election. And they finance it. They don't allow you to spend a kobo of your money, you know?
In other words, the people themselves were actually the godfathers of
Yes,
any
they were.
individual.
I knew this period.
I wonder what you even have to say about this.
So it is sad that what obtains today is worse than what used to be obtained 40 years ago.
Politics of godfatherism, that seems to have become a blight in Nigeria's democracy. What do you think are the likely consequences of this if things continue along this trajectory where godfathers bear down, especially based on what has been going on, in the recent past?
Yes, you can see that in the declining of the quality of leadership in the country. this is born out of godfatherism. Godfatherism is one of the basest things to happen in this country, and it is partly responsible for what we are going through. If you have a decline in the quality of leadership, every facet of life must suffer, because no country achieves anything with its best minds out of the system. If you look at the United States, the people who started the United States in 1776, George Washington, John Jay, James Madison, James Monroe, Jefferson, all of them were highly educated.
Yes.
And that trend continued. But because they were very serious people, that trend continued. But here, you see that people who are governing us, a lot of them are not supposed to be in such positions. And this is because internal democracy has been jettisoned. When there is internal democracy, that also affords us the opportunity to assemble, matured minds. Because before any primary election takes place, a screening takes place,
yes,
by elders of the parties. Now, this eldership has also been jettisoned, because what governors do is to recruit their own elders who will do anything for them. So whether whether you merit it or you don't merit it, these governors will ensure that you sail through, because they want you to sail through. This must change. So, the contradictions are very many, but you have the principal ones, and among the principal ones you have the principal one. And I think as far as politics is concerned here, the absence of internal democracy is what is responsible for the declining of a lot of things. And it must be restored. Once you restore it, by implication, you have now given the power back to the people for them to elect or select anybody they wish to.
Thank you so much. It's been such a delight speaking with you. Right Honorable Umar Ghali Abba, former Speaker of the Nigerian House of Representatives between 1999 and 2003. And that's our show today on Arise Special. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Ngozi Alebu. See you next time.